Well, hello good people, and welcome back to the channel. It's Friday, it's New Year's Eve, and what better way to end the year than to talk about episode 11 of Ready to Love DC. Now, as many of you already know, Ready to Love was on a break last week, but the show decided to post some of the previews for this episode. And one preview that really caused a stir amongst fans is the showdown between Phil and Shiloh. A few days ago, I uploaded a video which shared how I felt about what was said in the short video clip. Some fans agreed with my opinion and some didn't. But if you haven't seen the video, then be sure to check it out and judge for yourself. But for this episode, the remaining ladies were tasked with introducing the men to meet their family. The ladies also have the power to eliminate one of the men in this episode. So for the purposes of this review, I will discuss my thoughts on the scenes featuring the ladies introducing the men to their family members, and I'll also give a comprehensive take on the Phil and Shiloh situation once I heard all the information that is available. So without any further delay, let's jump right in. The episode starts off with the remaining ladies meeting with Nephew Tommy, and as usual, Nephew Tommy welcomes them back to the lounge, and he tasks them with introducing their favorite men to the family members. Nephew Tommy asks the women to lean on their family for guidance and to make the men sweat. And upon hearing that, I can only imagine what questions these family members would ask the guys. So we first have Sydney, who has her mother and father ready to meet Phil. The parents seem to be friendly and old school, and I see where Sydney gets her looks from. Phil arrives, and he has flowers for Sydney and Sydney's mother, and he also has a bottle of bourbon for Sydney's father. In the back of my mind, I gotta say that Phil is laying it on pretty thick. But once everyone gets settled, Sydney's mother starts asking some pretty invasive questions, such as, does Phil have a savings account? Red flag. Phil takes the question in stride and he handles the situation like a pro. Sydney's father is pretty laid back during the scene, and we don't really hear much from him. But when Phil leaves, we learn that the parents really like him. We then get a scene of Aisha, who has her mother and brother ready to meet Donta. Donta also brings flowers, but the flowers are only for Aisha's mother. Right out the gate, as soon as Donta sits down, Aisha's brother asks Donta about the 3 kids by 3 different women. Donta takes the question in stride, and he gives the right answers in return. The mother also asks Donta, when it comes to Aisha, is he a reason, a season, or a lifetime? And he replies, lifetime. Now, I personally haven't seen any evidence on the show that Donta and Aisha are that serious, but I also have to concede that the show is heavily edited, and we as the audience don't really know what's going on behind the scene. When Donta leaves, the family confirms that they like him. We then see Mumeen, who has her father, uncle, and older sister to meet Frank. When Frank arrives, he pretty much knows what to expect because he's African, and he expects Mumeen's father to be strict. During their sit down, the uncle asks Frank if Mumeen is his only connection, and Frank is honest in telling everyone about his connection with Sydney. The father lets Frank know not to waste Mumeen's time, and Frank seems to get the message. We then see Frank leave, and while the sister has some reservations about him, Mumeen's father and uncle seem to like him. The next scene is the scene that we all been waiting for. Shiloh and Phil meet up with Nephew Tommy to talk about the incident that happened at the bar. Nephew Tommy asks the 2 of them to explain what happened, and this is when Shiloh gets to the meat and potatoes of what happened. Shiloh says that it all started at the retreat when she asked Phil how he felt about her and the process. Well, after that conversation, Shiloh had time to process Phil's answer, and she felt the need to meet Phil at the bar to discuss things further. This is when we get to the preview of the scene that was posted earlier in the week. After Shiloh shares her version of events, Phil does a great job at providing the much needed context. According to Phil, the time when the argument occurred was around 4 or 5 in the morning. They were also in a pretty bad part of town, and Shiloh decided to walk down a weird alley by herself. Phil, being the protector that he is, admitted to picking up Shiloh and trying to take her back to her car. So after hearing Phil's side of the story, allow me to give an unbiased opinion on the matter. I fully acknowledge that Shiloh has past trauma and was triggered when Phil touched her against her will. If Shiloh wanted to press charges against Phil, she would have a good case. And from a legal standpoint, the moment Shiloh told Phil to stop touching her, he should have stopped. But let's look at things from Phil's perspective. In his mind, this lady, who had been drinking, is walking by herself in a sketchy part of town in the wee hours of the morning and acting pretty reckless. He knows that if he allows her to do whatever she wants, that something could happen to her. And if Shiloh was robbed, kidnapped, or assaulted by somebody in the alley, Phil would have felt pretty guilty for not being there to protect her. And after all, and if you've been on social media lately, then you know that a lot of black women authentically feel that black men do not protect them. Well, this is a case of a black man trying to protect a black woman and getting ridiculed for it. He did what he felt was right and his intentions were pure. Nephew Tommy listens to the both of them, he scolds them both and encourages them to work things out. The next scene we get is of Sydney introducing Frank to meet her sister. And in my opinion, because Frank didn't meet the parents, he may be Sydney's second choice. The sister asks Frank if he's dating other women, and Frank is caught off guard by this. He starts to show some hesitancy in his answers. Frank lets the sister know that he is seeing somebody else, but that he doesn't want to lose Sydney. And Sydney wants to know if Frank is telling that to Mumeen as well. And Frank gives a brief pause because he likely knows that Sydney and Mumeen are going to compare notes at the end of the meetups. Frank leaves and the sister says that she's not really sold on Frank, but she can see him as a good friend to Sydney. That's code for the friend zone. We then get a scene of Sabrina meeting up with Walter, and because Sabrina's cousin is sick, they have a discussion via Zoom. The cousin asks Walter what drew him to Sabrina, and he gives a very surface level answer. The cousin also said that she heard Walter usually dates younger women, and asks him if he's ready to be with an older woman, and Walter handles the question like a pro. Walter leaves the meetup, and the cousin feels that Walter is genuine, but I really don't see the chemistry between the two of them that will lead them to be in a committed relationship. Nephew Tommy meets back up with all the women and they talk about their assignment. Most of the women reiterate how their family felt about the men, but when it's Shiloh's turn, she lets the group know that she didn't feel comfortable having Phil meet her family. Shiloh shares her story of what happened, and she conveniently leaves out the context behind Phil's actions. I will give Shiloh credit in letting the women know that Phil wasn't trying to physically harm her. If any of you saw the discussions behind the preview for this episode, then you would know that Phil was being called everything from a predator to a woman beater, and he was being dragged through the mud under the assumption that he tried to assault Shiloh. Tommy asks if the situation between her and Phil can be repaired, and she explains that she doesn't know how. In a surprise move, Tommy lets the ladies know that there will not be an elimination this week. So Phil meets up with Shiloh, and during this meeting, Shiloh explains that she is hurt and angry at what Phil did. Phil tries to explain why he did what he did, but Shiloh makes it pretty clear that she doesn't want to hear it. And in my opinion, this entire scene was a huge missed opportunity for the two of them to learn from one another, get some much needed closure, and heal from the incident. Once again, I acknowledge that Shiloh felt triggered by what Phil did, but Shiloh was asking Phil to only see her side of what happened, and only empathize with her while refusing to hear why he felt the need to do what he did or acknowledge his feelings behind what happened. And because Shiloh only wanted Phil to see her side of things, Phil ultimately became defensive and he wanted no parts of understanding where Shiloh was coming from. And I can say from personal experience, I know where Phil is coming from. If something would have happened to Shiloh as she walked away, he wouldn't have been able to live with himself for it. But there are still some people out there who feel that Phil was completely wrong for touching Shiloh. So Shiloh meets up with Nephew Tommy, and she self-eliminates. So overall, on a scale of 1 to 10, I will give this episode a 4. The meetings between the men and the ladies' family members went as expected, but this situation between Phil and Shiloh was very draining and misleading. But I would definitely like to know what you all thought about this episode, my review, or the situation between Phil and Shiloh. Ladies, if you were in Shiloh's position and there's a possibility of you being in danger, would you want a man to protect you, or would you want him to leave you alone and let the chips fall where they may? Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to reply to each and every comment. Until next year, stay tuned and stay safe. Peace.